All right. Good evening. My name is Cynthia Riccio, and I am the Director of Programs and Planning at the New Haven Museum. And thank you for joining us tonight for the second program in our series, Celebrating a Century, 100 Years of Albertus Magnus. Tonight, we are joined by Albertus Magnus College Interim Director of Library Services, and college archivist Catie White for this virtual lecture, An Idea for Education, Albertus Magnus College's Multicultural Identity. With its opening in September of 1925, Albertus Magnus College students were women who sometimes faced marginalization due to their religion, and many may have been the first in their family to attain a higher education. During her lecture, Catie White will highlight the history of diversity at Albertus Magnus College. In 2023, the school published its first diversity statement. She notes while the college strives to promote a richly diverse and inclusive community and cultivate an atmosphere of mutual respect and ethical behavior, with particular attention to the underserved and historically marginalized members of the Albertus community, whether they be students, staff, or faculty. White notes from our opening day in 1925 with a student body of 50, Albertus Magnus College has expanded into a diverse and multicultural co-ed student body of close to 1,500. We've become an inclusive institution that will not turn anyone away from seeking an education. Our series will continue on March 18th with another lecture by Catie called Fearless Females at Albertus Magnus College and a related What's in the Whitney Library program, The Evolution of Girls' Education. This will highlight the topic using documents, books, and materials from both the Albertus Magnus College archives and our own Whitney Library, and that's on April 11th. Catie White is the Interim Director of Library Services and College Archivist at Albertus Magnus College. She holds a Master of Library and Information Science from Simmons University and a Bachelor of Arts from St. Michael's College. With a decade of experience in the library and museum field, Catie has a passion for research and uncovering stories from the past that may not have been ever told. She is the author of Albertus Magnus College, Fearless Endless Truth, Celebrating a Century of Impact Through Education, Faith, and Tradition, 1925 to 2025. A new and updated history of Albertus Magnus College to mark the college's centennial. Welcome, Catie.
Thanks, Cindy, and thank you all for joining us tonight for this presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Alrighty. Okay. Awesome. So thank you so much again for your warm welcome. And as Cindy mentioned, this is our second event with the New Haven Museum to celebrate 100 years of Albertus Magnus College here in New Haven, Connecticut. As was mentioned, my name is Catie White, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today to take you through the multicultural identity and history of Albertus. During this presentation, I aim to turn up the volume of voices that may not have been previously heard from in telling the history of the college, and highlight some of the stories that may have been kind of inadvertently sidelined over the years. And we do acknowledge that there are gaps in our records. These stories are by no means the only or even the definitive narrative of the multicultural identity of Albertus, but through this presentation today, I hope that the history of the kind of underrepresented and marginalized voices will become a major part of our narrative and no longer be kept from the spotlight. So before we get started, I would like to make a quick disclaimer. So we here at Albertus are committed to presenting our history in a way that is respectful to the communities represented by and experiencing our archival collections. We acknowledge that the language used in the past is on occasion outdated, biased, and polarizing. So, first and foremost in our efforts is the conscious preservation of context while risking present day interpretations that may be deemed offensive. We are committed to updating outdated catalog records while preserving the historical context of archival materials. And if any offense is made by today's presentation, please know that it is not intentional. So with that in mind, let's get started. All right, so our journey begins on September 14th, 1924, when the following article ran in the New York Times. This small column was squeezed between an article on stained glass windows and Soviet Union legislation on the Sunday edition of the New York Times, and it is the first public announcement of the establishment of Albertus Magnus College. It is simply entitled Buy a State for a School. And what is remarkable about this article is two things. Um, First, that the Dominican Sisters of St. Mary of the Springs only paid $250,000 for a mansion and 10 acres of land on Prospect Street in New Haven, Connecticut. In today's money, that's about $5 million charged to the Dominican Sisters apiece. So I guess it's a bit of a bargain, but still very expensive. Um, Second is that the Dominican Sisters, for several years, have planned the organization of a college which would be open to young women of every creed and race, and which would be conducted under broad and liberal auspices. So, from the very beginning of Albertus, the Dominican Sisters wanted their New England college to be open and welcoming to all women who sought a liberal arts education. This idea was a revolutionary one, as it has never been done before. A residential, Catholic, liberal arts college for women in New England did not exist in 1924. Now, there were colleges for women at the time, such as Smith and Vassar. However, they did not have a Catholic or even a liberal arts focus. And the very idea of a Catholic college on its own was an innovative concept, as Catholics at the time were often marginalized. The early 1900s saw most practicing Catholics in America coming from immigrant families. This new population clashed against the Anglo-Protestant establishment, and anti-Catholic publications and societies were widespread throughout the United States in the 20th century. However, institutions such as the Knights of Columbus and the National Catholic Welfare Council worked to combat anti-Catholic activity and sought to ensure that parochial schools at every level of education could exist. So, even though these societal challenges were present in the 1920s, it did not stop the Dominican Sisters from opening their college. A year later, on September 25th, 1925, Albertus Magnus College officially opened its doors with 14 faculty members and 50 young women from all different backgrounds attending as students. Sternchus, O'Connor, Doherty, and Seffarelli are just a few of the surnames of students who attended in the class of 1928. Children and grandchildren of immigrants, these Catholic young ladies believed in the Dominican Sisters' idea for education. The Dominican Sisters and Dominican friars taught alongside lay teachers, most of whom were Catholic faculty from Yale, and all were eager to see where this new college could go. The new college sought to provide the highest form of education for women possible. In the preliminary announcement of Albertus, the course of study dictated that each young lady complete units in English, Latin, a modern language, history, mathematics, and science, with the remaining units made up from subjects of a student's choosing. So this was truly a liberal arts education where the women of Albertus could explore practically any academic field they desired. And this was a departure from a society who expected women to either establish a house and home, or if they must work, do so in a feminine profession, such as a secretarial work or something like that. At Albertus, a girl did not have to worry about that. She could be a chemist or a biologist, engage in economics and political science, or even seek the classics and go to study abroad in Rome. So this was truly a revolutionary concept. And the students of Albertus grasped this opportunity. And the class of 1928, seen here, is the first graduating class at Albertus, and they were immediately successful in finding work in the fields that they studied while students here at Albertus. So in the class of 1928, there were 12 alums. Of the 12, four became school teachers, two found employment in the business side of the telephone company. One was a service observer, and the other one went into personnel work or kind of HR. Two became religious sisters. Two went on to graduate studies at Yale. One became a nurse, and one pursued foreign languages. One became a secretary, and one even became an actress. So, although you could argue that women could become secretaries and actresses without a college education, and certainly women did in the 1920s, the Alberta's educated woman quickly excelled among her peers. In fact, the class of 1928 returned to campus throughout the 1930s as alum and gave career advice to current students. And they reported being supervisors, heads of departments, and top of their class at Yale within 5 years of their graduation. So these women proved that the Dominican sisters' idea for an education may not have been so far-fetched after all. So as Albertus gained its footing as an institution of higher learning, its enrollment grew. By 1935, 10 years after opening, Albertus' student population had doubled from 50 students to 113. Of the 33 freshmen who started in 1935, one young lady was from Puerto Rico, and this is the first record of a Hispanic student at Albertus. Students from Puerto Rico would continue to attend Albertus throughout its history. And in fact, in 1945, another student from Puerto Rico is reported arriving alongside Albertus's first international students. And those international students came from Canada, China, and Curacao. Hispanic culture is not a foreign concept to Albertus, as Professor Ruth Gillespie, seen here, one of the 14 founding faculty members, taught both German and Spanish at the college. Professor Gillespie championed Spanish culture and established the Centro Español, or the Spanish Club, on campus in 1931. Throughout her 42-year tenure at Albertus, she oversaw the production of many Spanish plays, lectures, and debates between the Albertus and Yale language clubs on campus, and she translated many works, including plays and literature, from Spanish to English. In 1939, Sister M. Boniface, Dean of Albertus, wrote in her report to the advisory board of the college that the, quote, question of color has not become a worry to us yet, end quote. Although the sisters were open to all young women, the barriers for Black women and African American women to access higher education were still in place within society. While obviously open to the idea of a diverse campus, the Sisters of Albertus had not yet had to face it. What would they do if a Black or African American student applied? Would they allow her entry to the college or conform to societal expectations? Sister Boniface's report becomes increasingly intriguing when she goes on to write that last year a colored girl made inquiries regarding application, but lost her interest when she heard she would be required to take college board examinations for entrance. What is interesting about this is that she neither denies the student's inquiry, either by not reporting it at all or dismissing it as a foolish thing for the young lady to do, nor shuns it away as an insult. It appears, to me at least, that Sister Boniface's report seems to emphasize the educational requirements needed to enter. And that's the issue at hand, not the fact that the student was a student of color who was making the request. But the sisters will have to wait a little bit longer to answer this question. In fact, they have to wait 10 years. So in 1949, the sisters had their answer to this question of color. And for the first time in the records of Albertus, students of color are mentioned in the enrollment report. Sister M. Frances de Saules writes that of the 205 students enrolled at the college, Albertus lost 18, 5 seniors, 6 juniors, 7 sophomores. Of those, 2 were Black. One student transfers to Temple University in Philadelphia, and the other is married. This small sentence is groundbreaking. Although we do not know the names of these 2 students, just by mentioning them of having been enrolled at Albertus, even though they did not complete their degree, signals that 24 years into Albertus's history, the Dominican sisters were upholding their mission to truly extend education to all. Albertus did not have to wait much longer to confer its first degree to a Black student. 6 years later, in 1955, 30 years after Albertus's opening, Janet Rose B. Gibson became the first Black student to graduate from Albertus Magnus College, earning a BA in sociology with minors in business and economics. Janet first arrived on campus in the fall of 1951 and was the only Black student. In a 1964 interview for the Alumni magazine, Janet recalls that she was accepted by everyone on campus, and if she hadn't been, she said, she would have been surprised. While a student at Albertus, Janet was involved in many clubs and organizations, including as a writer and editor for the Silver Horn, the campus newspaper, and was even elected by her peers as a member of the May Day Queen's Court during her senior year. And Janet is here in the picture. In the same 1964 article for the Alumni magazine, however, Janet acknowledged that her time at Albertus were, quote, the final days of her innocence, end quote, as she faced the prejudiced reality of a segregated America after graduation. After Albertus, she earns a master's degree from Suffolk University and goes on to have a very successful career. She was a social worker at the New Haven Department of Welfare, and in the 1970s worked for the Salem State University as a counselor of alternative for individual development, which aided minority students at the university. So, heading into the 1960s, the civil rights movement in America is in full swing and kind of coming to a head in 1965. In July of 1965, Sister Marie-Louise Hubert, the 9th president of Albertus, wrote a letter regarding the, quote, education of non-white races, end quote. While the letter Hubert received is lost to time, a copy of her response is in the archive, which you can see here. In it, she writes, in regard to the non-white races, we at Albertus are committed to the philosophy that all men, regardless of race, creed, or color, are our brothers, since we are all children of one God, and that we are all bound to respect man's fundamental rights as a human being, the right to decent housing, education, employment, and the exercise of man's right as a citizen. She continues to say, so much for theory. The problem at the present time is how to put the theory into practice more effectively. At Albertus, we are making a special effort to recruit non-white students in our own area with the assistance of the local CIC, St. Martin Center, and the admissions staff of Yale University. The latter is endeavoring to recruit men students. Members of the admission staff call to our attention any young women whom they hear about that would qualify for our program. The main difficulties so far have been the scarcity of candidates with the necessary academic qualifications, and, should there be a large increase of candidates, the limited scholarship funds at our disposal. So, as was the case with the sister reporting to the advisory board in 1930, President Hubert neither denies nor shuns away the idea of educating any young woman who wishes to attend Albertus. After all, since Janet's graduation 10 years earlier, other young women of color have and did graduate from Albertus, although few in number. The issue is important to note that the issue is not their background, but the academics, just as with anyone else. But despite the scarcity of candidates, Albertus um, continued to have efforts to recruit diverse students to their campus. In March of 1973, President Francis Horn oversaw the launch of the Minority Student Program. The campus newspaper, the Silver Horn, reported that through this program, 4 full tuition scholarships will be offered to minority students each year. A total of 16 minority scholarship recipients, 4 in each class, is the college's goal. This idea was not reserved exclusively for traditional undergraduates who were entering the college straight out of high school. Older women who were returning to school and in need of financial assistance were encouraged to apply through the college's Begin Again program, a new continuing education program for working women which laid the foundation for the college's Professional and Graduate Studies, or PGS program, which continues today. As the chairman of the Minority Student Program recalled to the Silver Horn, there was never a conscious exclusion of minority students here, but we gradually realized that girls from the local community just never applied. Um, and at the time of the program's launch, the student population of the college numbered 161 students, with 21 full-time and 5 part-time students identifying as minorities. And with this initiative to grow and diversify the student body at Albertus, the college quickly found that their 16 scholarships awarded gave them cause to celebrate. On April 16, 1980, just 7 years after the launch of the Minority Student Program, members of the Albertus community presented the college's first International Culture Day celebration. Several tables were set up in the Hubert Campus Center to represent different countries and cultures from around the world from which Alberta's faculty, staff, and students hail from. Entertainment and performances also occurred throughout the day and included Nigerian, Irish, and Italian folk dancing, scenes from German, Spanish, and French plays, and an international sing-along. Now, I must admit that this entire presentation thus far, I've been touting how Albertus is open to all. However, being a all-female school since its conception, there's been a population that was intentionally excluded from the world of Albertus Magnus College, and that is men. So for a college who championed education for all, they were ignoring 50% of the world's population. Um, but on March 4th, 1985, 60 years after the college's opening, Albertus decides to open its doors further. Um, sorry, there we go. Decides to open its doors further. In a unanimous decision by the Board of Trustees, the college votes to admit men to all programs at the college. And although many students were opposed to Albertus losing its all-female identity, the student population grew considerably and became more diverse than ever before. With its doors open to men, Albertus saw by 1989 that total enrollment had increased to 707 students, with men making up 30% of total enrollment. In March of 1990, diversity on campus had expanded to new heights, and the Minority Student Union, or MSU, was established on campus. The MSU sought to establish better lines of communication with Albertus through a greater understanding of the issues that minorities face on predominantly white campuses. And this student group got to work right away. In February of 1991, with the support of the MSU, the first celebrations of Black History Month took place on campus. As part of the events, an open house forum entitled Cultural Diversity on College Campuses was held in Aquinas Hall. The forum included reenactments performed by students of actual racial incidents that had occurred on campus, as well as discussions led by Albertus faculty and members of the New Haven community about diversity. A 1979 graduate in attendance was interviewed by the Silverhorn afterwards, and she commented, sorry, um, she commended the students of Albertus for advocating for themselves, saying, "It's like deja vu. The same issues came up when I was here, but you've taken them a step further. To teachers and administrators, it's up to them to take a personal approach." The faculty took the matters presented at the day's open house to heart and agreed with the students' sentiments. Professors present at the event acknowledged the students' call for inclusion of more minority authors in the college's curriculum and led the initiative to broaden Albertus's curriculum that was taught in the classroom. Individually and eventually as full departments, the faculty of Albertus changed the curriculum to reflect the diversity of their students, and now figures like Ta-Nehisi Coates and Toni Morrison are taught alongside Plato and Virginia Woolf. By the 2000s, celebrations of Black History Month became commonplace on campus. In 2005, the Dream Alive program, described as an incredible live commentary and dedication to the memory and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and leaders of the Civil Rights Movement, was presented to a full house on campus. Additionally, Albertus's Spanish Club continued to operate on campus and celebrated its 70th anniversary in 2001. In 2009, the National Hispanic Honor Society was revived on campus to induct 5 students and 1 professor. And soon the Spanish Club was making headlines once again. On September 29th, 2011, in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, Univision Connecticut televised a panel discussion from Albertus's Tagliatella Business and Leadership Lecture Series entitled Honoring Our Diversity, the Latino Experience in Connecticut. The focus on Albertus and the Latinx community continued, and in 2013, the college hosted Imagina las Posibilidades, Imagine the Possibilities, a forum outlining how Alberta sought to become the college of choice for Latinx students and their families. This was the first Spanish language admissions campaign for the college. Just as admissions was embracing the multicultural identity of Albertus, the students were looking for a space to talk about marginalized voices as well. In the fall of 2014, the Pursuing Truth and Justice Student Faculty Panel, more commonly known as the Justice Panel, was created in response to the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Gardner, and to create a space for conversation. The panel consists of Albertus faculty, staff, students, and members of the community who come together to discuss the institutionalized injustices that affect our society. Looking at the issues presented through academic study and Catholic social teaching. The Justice Panel is now a frequent campus event and offers space for the Albertus community to address societal issues such as police-community relations, sex trafficking, immigration, NFL contracts with players, racial bias in maternal health care, and much, much more. The spirit of advocacy at Albertus continues in today's students. In 2020, after the death of George Floyd, Masters of Art Therapy and Counseling students and alumni came together to help paint the City of New Haven's first official Black Lives Matter mural on Bassett Street. Signs stating racism is a sin, period, were placed around campus by the Dominican Sisters of Peace, and the Black Student Union was established on campus. In May of 2022, a new tradition was started on campus, with the first lavender graduation ceremony being held to celebrate the accomplishments of graduating LGBTQIA+ students. At this ceremony, held before the larger college commencement in May, graduating Albertus students who choose to participate are given special recognition and stoles to wear at commencement. A year later, in 2023, Albertus recognized another significant part of their population when they were named New England's first Catholic college to be designated as a Hispanic serving institution. This federal designation recognizes institutions with at least 25% of their full-time undergraduate student body who identify as Hispanic. At the time of this designation, 26% of Albertus's student population identified as Hispanic. Also in 2023, Albertus Magnus College, now New England's most diverse Catholic college, published its first diversity statement. The statement reads in part that the college strives to promote a richly diverse and inclusive community and cultivate an atmosphere of mutual respect and ethical behavior in the most robust manner possible, with particular attention to the underserved and historically marginalized members of the Albertus community, whether they be students, staff, or faculty. This diversity statement, and indeed really a mission statement, reflects the goals of the New York Times article that was written almost 100 years earlier. Albertus Magnus College strives to offer educational opportunities to people of all backgrounds, creeds, and races. It is an inclusive institution whose mission is to serve its community in the best way that it can. Today's multicultural identity at Albertus certainly reflects this mission. This fall, we welcomed our most diverse undergraduate class with 59% of students identifying as students of color. And today, 50% of our students are first generation or first in their family to attend college and earn a degree. Albertus has also been named a top performer in social mobility by U.S. News and World Report for 6 straight years and is the highest ranked school in Connecticut among regional universities in the North in this category. The social mobility designation recognizes Albertus's success in graduating low-income students who receive federal Pell Grants. Overall, Albertus's total student population today is still largely female. However, among traditional undergraduate students or those students who arrive at college straight out of high school, the split of genders is roughly 50-50. Of the entire student body, 58% identify as BIPOC individuals, with 28% identifying as Black or African American, 26% identifying as Hispanic, and 4% are international students. The upward mobility of Albertus's students today builds on Albertus's centennial legacy of transforming lives through enabling access to education for all to seek it. So, an idea for education 100 years in the making. In today's lexicon, the acronym IDEA, that is inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, appears in many mission statements and initiatives across institutions in the United States. A century ago, this acronym did not exist, but the Dominican sisters certainly had an idea of what they were doing. In 1925, the first female residential Catholic liberal arts college in New England was an extraordinary adventure. Women were not expected to get a college education. Practicing Catholics at the time were descendants of immigrants and therefore targets of societal discrimination. And really, with Yale just a mile down Prospect Street in New Haven, how could Albertus ever hope to compete? So, the Dominican sisters' idea for education stood firm against these naysayers. Albertus included every young woman who met the admission requirements and wanted access to a higher education. If you had the academic stamina and determination, you could succeed at Albertus, regardless of background. And a century later, Albertus Magnus College continues to do just that. So, thank you all so much for your time and attention this evening. And if you enjoyed today's presentation and would like to know more stories like these and information about the history of Albertus Magnus College, please check out my book, Fearless Endless Truth, which was written in commemoration of Albertus's centennial. Um, and with that, I will turn it over to questions. Thank you all so much.
Catie, thank you so much for your presentation. I do have one question, if you could clarify something.
Mhm.
Did you say in 1973 the entire student body was 161 students?
That is a good question. Um, in 1973, yes, the entire student body was 161.
Wow, okay.
Mhm.
That seems so low.
Yeah, so we have about 1,300 today. So,
Okay.
Mhm.
So I have a question. Could you just talk a little bit more about, how the students reacted when men were admitted?
Sure. So, it was definitely a mixed bag. Um, there were protests on campus. I don't know if I would really call them protests, but students gathered to express their displeasure. They did not want men to join them in the classroom. They felt that it would completely shift and change the identity of Albertus and what the college was. Which of course it kind of did shift the identity because now there were men, but Alberta's never lost its foundations of that Catholic liberal arts education. Um, and then there were some who supported it as well.
Mhm. Okay, one other question, kind of a big question. So, looking back over the last 100 years, what would you say the founders would be most proud of?
Ooh, that is a good question. Um, well, I suppose the uh, uh, just the fact that Albertus is still here 100 years later, I really would be curious to know if in 1925 they still th they thought Albertus, would still be functioning in 2025, or
Mhm,
even what society in the world would look like. And I think that they would be proud that the Dominican sisters are still here on campus. We still have them, and they are still teaching classes. They are involved with the administration of the college, so they're still very integral to Albertus, even though the faculty might look a little different from what they knew 100 years ago.
um, great. So, a couple more. Did I hear you say that some from the original class went on to be highly ranked in their classes at Yale? Awesome presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Yes, so one student went to Yale to become a nurse. Um, I want to say her name was Esther Budd, but I'm not 100% certain if that was her. Um, but she goes on to be the head of nurses at Yale Hospital, Yale New Haven. And she joins the army during the Second World War and is the head of the nurse corps during the war. And from that experience comes back to the States and essentially ends up running an entire wing of a hospital, I believe in upstate New York. But yeah, she's a very cool character.
That's fantastic.
Mhm.
Another one, thank you for this wonderful presentation. Has the college's diversity efforts been affected by national politics?
Ah, well, you're very welcome for the presentation. Not that I know of. So we still have the HSI designation. So
Yep. Great. Beautiful and informative presentation, Catie. Thank you. I seem to also remember someone saying that Albertus is the most ethically diverse Dominican college. Do you know if that still holds true?
oh, I'm not sure. I would like to think so, but maybe Ohio Dominican University will say otherwise. I'm not sure.
Okay. And then another comment. I remember in the 60s, there was a priest at the college who was very active in the civil rights movement and marched at Selma.
Oh,
So thank you, Marie, for sharing that with us.
very cool. Thank you.
Well, Catie, thank you so much again for your presentation tonight. And we look forward. Oh, hold on, I have a raised hand. Um, what is your, actually, sorry, one more. What is your connection to Rosary College?
Rosary College. I'm not familiar with Rosary College.
Okay.
We have a Rosary Hall. That's the library.
Oh, right. That's right, which I've been to, and it's quite beautiful.
Yes.
So, again, Catie, thank you so much for tonight. And we look forward to both March 18th for our next in our series, and then on April 11th, our collaboration with our libraries.
Yes, looking forward to it. Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you all for joining tonight, and we will see you all soon.